It'd be really great to have Jamie give us a tour and share some of his thoughts behind his selections. So here's Jamie Franklin. Yay, Jamie. Yeah, so do you want to say anything first, or you want to just...
No, I think, this is an interesting process. Blind jurying is a balancing act. I don't know a name. I can't read anything about what an artist is trying to communicate. I just look at images on a screen and try to weave a story together, or maybe lots of stories together that might overlap, might repel one another. I thought going into this that I might see a lot of work that reflects kind of the anxiety and kind of conflicted nature of contemporary American culture. And I saw some of it, but I also saw a lot of it that kind of, I don't want to say ran in the other direction, but found some sort of maybe solace in looking the other way. And so, I mean, it's a piece by piece kind of building up of hopefully a lot of different things that speak to one another. But of course, I also didn't install the gallery. So a lot of the conversations that end up resulting in the physical space are because of Sam's choices. As after the works are selected, she brings them together, and part of my curatorial practice is often being able to say things without words by allowing work to speak to each other across space in the gallery. And so I think Sam did a beautiful job of that. But I obviously can't talk about everything, and there's a largest group, but I thought maybe I would bounce back and forth amongst things that I think I might have semi-interesting things to say about. And also, I would love it to be a conversation because I came at this completely fresh. I still haven't had an opportunity to speak to a single artist about the work that I selected for the show. So all I can tell you is what the work kind of stirred up in my own imagination. And we can go from there, because I'd be interested in hearing what it stirred up in yours as well. Yes?
When you saw the slides blind, could you see their titles?
I had titles, media, and dimensions, I believe. Yep. But of course, those can always be deceiving. But titles are important in many cases. Not always, but sometimes. I guess why don't we start over? Anybody who knows anything about me. My name is Jamie Franklin. I'm the curator at the Bennington Museum down in the southwestern corner of Vermont. I guess we're over in New Hampshire. I keep thinking that we're in Vermont. Not quite, almost. Our twin. So I'm down there. We have the largest collection of grandma Moses in the world, a folk artist, self-taught artist. And a lot of what I've done from my kind of curatorial and scholarly position there at the museum is looked at kind of self-taught folk art and the intersections with modernism in America in the 20th century. And so I often find myself drawn to work that resonates with that world. And this sculpture certainly did that for me. The kind of the use of kind of colored fabrics, the amoeba-like, and seeing it in person is much different than seeing it in slides. I got a sense that it had a kind of vibrant, quirky kind of personality, but it's much more vibrant and quirky in person. And I love that about it. And I don't know what to say about it other than it draws me in, and I could spend a lot of time looking carefully and enjoying it for what it is. I don't know what it is, but it intrigues me and it drew me in immediately when I saw images of it. Two other works I mentioned, kind of in my, we'll call it an intro. Some people kind of maybe looking away from kind of the conflicted nature of contemporary culture and society here in America, there are a number of works on the show that address what I might call family or community. There are two here, certainly, kind of ways in which we find solace in kind of, contemporary culture. But the major kind of theme that I saw and that continued to draw me back in and helped kind of me structure a lot of my selections were nature. And not necessarily traditional depictions of nature, but rather kind of artists that took kind of the cycles of nature, the seasons, sunsets, sunrises, deep geologic time, things beyond our world that we live on, so kind of the cosmos. And that helps, I think, sometimes ground ourselves in realizing that we're just little specks on this planet, and artists have that ability to kind of position us in relationship to the larger world and sometimes the cosmos in ways that maybe bring solace. This is actually the first image that I opened up when I started the jurying process, or it was certainly the first application I opened up. Most of the applications included two images by the same artist, and they were kind of in an A-B. I don't know who put them in that order, whether it was the artist or whatnot, but oftentimes it kind of felt like maybe the artist was encouraging me to look at the first one first, but I often ended up being drawn to the second one. And this painting falls into that. And, it kind of, that, I don't know, coyote, dog, canine of some sort, perhaps, howling at the moon, kind of got at that kind of darker quality, which the other work by this artist was a great painting, but it didn't kind of draw me in to kind of imagining my own kind of relationship with the world these days. And so I like that about that. And then these two sculptures, I don't like picking favorites, but I am a mineral collector, and my partner is a lover of mushrooms, and we do a lot of foraging. And there are a number of works that have mushrooms or mycorrhizal networks. And I love these works. Yes, there are physical crystals. There are depictions of mushrooms. But I'm particularly drawn to these slices of layered, and I mentioned earlier the idea of kind of deep geologic time, which kind of helps kind of position us outside of our day-to-day context and understand that there's a lot more to this world than today, yesterday, and tomorrow. So I really kind of love that about these, crystals and minerals in general. We kind of think of them as kind of, ancillary to our daily lives, but in fact, everything about our digital world is based on minerals, often, being extracted from the earth in Africa. Now we're looking for lithium sources, and one of the largest untapped lithium sources in the world is in Maine, not far from us. So, minerals and kind of things that look like they're very much disconnected from contemporary culture, but I think we might be able to find solutions to some of our problems if we pay a little bit more attention to them. I think this photograph, there was another kind of triptych like this from the same artist in the group. I ended up finding myself drawn to this one. And you'll notice I didn't pick a ton of both works by the same artist, maybe a handful, a little bit more than that. But I don't know what the artist saw as the relationship between these three images, but all of them are not things that you would typically think would be the subject of a photographer's gaze. And I was drawn to them because they got us to pay attention to things that we may not otherwise pay attention to. And I think that in many ways is the job of any artist, but I think it's particularly true of the photographic medium because it's a depiction of the real world that we live in. And, you know, having lived in relatively rural New England for 20 plus years now, you know, piles of logs in the woods, weeds growing at the edge of a house amongst an unkempt bed of flowers, and, you know, a skull next to a chain link fence. You know, I don't know, but the juxtapositions intrigued me, and that's why I was drawn to it. I think, you know, one of the other kind of larger themes is this kind of cycle of life, death, rebirth, disintegration, rebirth. And so that's why I probably was drawn to the skull image in particular, but its relationship to kind of other quotidian, everyday things. You know, a pile of wood, maybe they were just clearing, maybe they had intended to cut it for firewood but never got to it, and now it's just kind of rotting into the ground. But it makes a compelling image. Another image of family, and family as a form of survival. I've already said it. I think, you know, looking to our family, biological or otherwise, friends, our community, is really important these days. And I think I was drawn to this image because of that theme and that idea. I probably picked at least 4 or 5 sunsets, or looking through a sunset through the trees. Again, the cycles of life of the day, the beauty that we can find in those kind of small, quiet moments where we're by ourselves standing in a field, the colors, the things that you know, bring a smile to our face, and kind of, again, ground us. I really love these photographs, and I love them for many of the same reasons that I was talking about in relationship to those, but I often select literary or poetic excerpts as openings to curatorial statements. And I picked one for the exhibition, 2 actually for the exhibition as a whole. One is probably one of my favorite quotes from Walt Whitman, which is, "Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes." And that's why there are multitudes of voices that may or may not contradict themselves here in this space tonight. But I also picked this slightly longer quote from Jorge Luis Borges' The Library of Babel. And I think it were these images that brought me to that quote. It says, "The library will endure. Everything has not yet been written. We walk the corridors, searching the shelves, rearranging them, seeking patterns of meaning in vast stretches of cacophony and incoherence, reading the history of what was and what will be, collecting thoughts and counter-thoughts, and at intervals glimpsing mirrors in which we may recognize creatures of information." And this idea of words, books, printed pages, information deteriorating and kind of melting back into the earth, roots, slugs, digesting them, and the idea of decay and you know, rebirth, because when things die, they feed the soil, and things can grow back. And that idea, if anybody's familiar with the Library of Babel, it's an old librarian who's endlessly wandering a library that contains infinite works of human knowledge, or incoherence as it may be, any infinite number of connections of letters and punctuation marks that you could possibly ever imagine. And it's this idea of, you know, what is now may not be what is tomorrow, and what is tomorrow may not be what is a million years from now. And we come back to it again and again, and there's always something new. One of the other themes that I think, in my mind, popped up again and again and helped influence my selection was the idea of mythology, folklore, kind of ancient wisdom and storytelling. I think I did look up what radix ipsius means when I was jurying. I've forgotten it. But just that kind of that Latin title, and the wings that kind of remind me of Nike of Samothrace, getting back and grounding us in kind of stories of the classics and kind of mythology. And yet it's completely abstract. And again, I have no idea what the artist is thinking or trying to convey, but to me, roots going up, not down, wings, all of those ideas, but particularly kind of mythology and folklore were a theme that I kept seeing come back again and again. We'll see it again. We see it in this painting to the left. The title is The Maiden's Well, which is a story across many cultures of going to gather water at the well and meeting the young maiden. It's an immemorial story that's told over and over again across cultures. I mean, I also kind of love the kind of dark, that seems like it could be a happy story of coming, drawing water, sustenance, finding a young maiden. But there's a kind of dark quality to this painting, and I don't know if those two narratives were intended to intersect or not in the artist's mind, but it intrigued me when I came across it. These are three works which I'm glad Sam brought them together. They may not be obvious together. I don't know that I connected them personally, but thematically I think I was. The photograph on the right is perhaps the most obvious image in the exhibition of what I talked about earlier, of kind of the conflicted nature of America and Americans, and our kind of, what is the flag? What is patriotism? We're coming upon our 250th birthday coming up in less than a month. A lot of peoples are thinking about it in different ways, and yet it's kind of this flag hanging in the back of this kind of dingy, siding falling apart, seeing it through a window, the dirt on the side of the house. So that's an obvious, but also kind of this image, lots of floral images, but this kind of disintegration and kind of breaking apart of the traditional kind of floral still life, faces, kind of ghostly faces coming out at us. And then this really, I don't know what to make of this. It reminds me of David Lynch and Twin Peaks. The corner, the ladder, the hanging house-like structure. I'm not sure. It's weird. I like it. That's about as much as I can say. But I like how these three images work together, and one may not think of them as visually working together, but I think thematically they draw things out that you might not otherwise think about. As we transition into this next space, these two works by the same artist who, again, I didn't have the artist's name, so I don't connect them, and Kremers. They reflect a lot of the themes that I've already talked about. The piece on the right, the cosmos, the turning of time. The figures reminded me of Blake, and William Blake is one of my favorite artists of all time, so I liked it. And this work, I'm not a religious person, but the juxtaposition of the flowers in front of the stained windows and the kind of the starry sky beyond, kind of using nature and thinking about nature as kind of a kind of spiritual home and a place of respite for us is something that I liked. And I thought both of those works taught about different things. I love the kind of the sharpness. Watercolor is not an easy medium. And the kind of both the juxtaposition of the kind of sharpness and the kind of atmospheric qualities that she got in both of the works, I really loved. These books, I love these books. Again, the kind of the classical sculpture reminded me of kind of mythology. I forget the title, but I think it's also Moon Serenade. I've always loved nighttime walks and connecting with the stars, but also the natural world. Yeah. I feel like there is some mythological story being told. I'm just not sure what it is. You know, the figures with antlers, the fish, the kind of scary toothed beast below the water. My son and I are fishermen, and one of his friends, we were out catching, and he caught a big, huge pike. I don't know if you're familiar with pike, but they have teeth. There's both kind of the danger of the natural world, but also the kind of mystery of these figures that are half animal, half human. I'm sure there's some story to be told. I'm not sure what it is, but I'd love to learn more. I loved, so this artist again had two works. I love the pairing in this one of the bones with the kind of very pastel palette, the floral motif, and the title diminishing into flowers. Again, echoing that cycle of life that I've talked about a lot. Folklore, mythology, with, I think this is was created with a 3D drawing pen, which is kind of taking folklore and mythology and the ancient past and bringing it together with very contemporary technology and media. And I love that juxtaposition of something that is of the moment, but also looks back to tell stories. I love this piece. This is an artist where I wasn't quite sure what to make of their two works, but then I looked up We Keep You Alive to Serve the Ship, So Row Well and Live. I don't remember the title of a movie, but it's like a classic 1950s movie of the Roman times, and one of like the Roman emperors is in the underbelly of a ship crossing the Mediterranean, and there are all these slaves rowing the ship, and he stops, and this is what he says to a person. And I have no idea what that has to do with a cowboy or oh, what a beautiful morning. But it again, it creates questions. And I always like works that makes me wonder what's going on and makes me kind of start to imagine and think outside of the box. And this is when you're coming to something kind of completely blind, you have to find those themes in order to kind of help you make selections. There were plenty of other work that I'm sure would have looked lovely in these gallery spaces that I didn't pick, and it's because I needed to narrow it down to a number that I was provided. Sam was flexible and worked with me. My first number was a little high. I spent another session kind of dwindling it down after the kind of themes that sort of arose up in me by looking at the work. I mentioned my interest in myceliums. My partner listens to audiobooks, and there was a period in which she was listening to audiobooks about mushrooms. And there was one book in particular where this guy in a British accent kept saying the word mycelial or mycorrhizal networks. But it's the idea of looking at nature, looking at things particularly below our feet that we don't ever see in our day-to-day experiences. I'm not an expert on mycorrhizal networks, so don't ask me technical or scientific questions, but I know that people who are experts and who are scientists and do understand these things believe that there's a lot that we can learn about mycorrhizal networks and how different organisms, mushrooms, trees, other plants collaborate as opposed to kind of the Darwinian philosophy of evolution, and that maybe humans can learn from that idea of cooperation and collaboration, and that we can gain the best of everybody, and together we can get out of the mess that we put ourselves in.
You're wearing a psychedelic mushroom.
I am wearing a psychedelic mushroom shirt. Yes. I don't know, I mentioned my background in kind of folk, self-taught outsider art. I don't know if this is an intentional or unintentional, but there's an artist by the name of Janet Sobel, or Sobel. She was active in New York City in the 1940s. She didn't have any artistic training, and this painting reminds me a lot of her work. She was influential on Jackson Pollock. She was making drip paintings before Jackson Pollock, often kind of doing kind of gestural abstractions and then coming back to it and drawing in faces and things like that. But I particularly love this kind of, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and I lived with my backyard was a forest, and so I grew up in the woods. I still like to get back to the woods as often as I can, and I love kind of, particularly this one because you're in the woods, but these views through trees, you know, faces kind of appearing, animals, the things that you can find real or imagined when you're walking out in the woods, and I love that about this painting. I think anybody who is in the art world, who enjoys art, who makes art, who is a curator, works in this field, knows that so much of the imagery that we look at today is mitigated by a screen. And when you're making jury choices, you can't always see things that I think are important when you see the work in real life. And this is a work where I thought it was probably a small-scale collage. I may not have looked at the dimensions as closely as I should have. I was drawn to it. I mean, I love this. It's titled Untitled Pythagoras, or Pythagoras. You know, I'm coming back to my quote from the Library of Babel, the coming together of all of these disparate elements. It's, you know, it's like a Library of Babel with a scholar librarian in the middle trying to make sense of the kind of disparate nature of the world. I've mentioned multiple times that the jury process is blind. I've lived in this region for 20 years. It's hard to not know some of the artists. This is a work by John Isherwood, who runs the sculpture department at Bennington College. It would have been really hard to understand this work in digital slides, but I saw it and I immediately knew who it was, and I was familiar with the work. I hadn't seen this piece before, but I'm familiar with his work. I'm familiar with a lot of his thought process. I don't know about this work. We haven't had a conversation about it. Maybe we will tonight. I think he said he might be here at the opening. But John creates these sculptures, often have kind of subtle kinetic elements to them, often draw on deep space, fossils, the fossilized record. I don't know if any of that's in this, but his work has always intrigued me. It takes time, it's slow, it's subtle. I encourage you to spend time with it, and if you find him with a name tag on, ask him about it, because I'm sure he'll tell you an intriguing story. You know, as we come to the end, oh, thank you. You know, I awoke to find myself in a dark wood. I think we all feel like that sometimes these days, but it also draws on mythology and folklore. I'm interested in, and by the way, when I picked this painting, I didn't see this figure. I only saw it when I first came and saw this painting in person. This figure, which this figure seems to be gazing at, who is that? What is that? What is the connection between them? Again, there's a story waiting to be told. I can't help but look at this painting and think about ICE detention centers, fences real and imagined, the pearl amidst the intestines, picking beauty out from, you know, visceral. These were two of the most intriguing paintings I came across. I was trying to debate whether I only wanted to include one or include two, and they were both just so bizarre I couldn't choose between them, so I decided to go with both. I love this painting, Alone in the End, the kind of, you know, the light kind of casting down on a hospital bed, you know, anybody who's experienced a loved one, either sick or towards the end of life. But it's an alligator in a blue shirt. I don't know, but I love it. And then it gets even weirder over here with a like a Chalou figure. It's titled Relaxing. He's wearing a hoodie on the couch, and then he's got some weird humanoid in a cage. Again, I'm drawing to weird things that I don't know have answers. And I think that's the beauty of art. So maybe that's a good place to stop.